Before we start the show, we would like to thank our sponsors for 2024, Beefmaster Education Endowment Fund. Thank you for what you do for the breed, and thank you for supporting our show. SEBA, the Southeastern Beefmaster Breeders Association. Don't miss their convention and sale every August. Thank you for supporting the show. Emmons Ranch Beefmasters, Mr. Steve and Mrs. Cindy. They need no introduction. They always breed great cattle, and we just appreciate what you guys do, and thank you for supporting us. C&M Ranches out of Kershaw, South Carolina, the Chick family. Be on the lookout for their sale starting in 2025. Thank you for supporting the show. Lissy's Beefmasters is another one that doesn't need any introduction. We appreciate what you do for the breed and for our show. Cottage Farms Beefmasters, they have a sale with Clark Jones every year in June. Thank you for supporting our show. Sea Shepherd Beefmasters, thank you for supporting the show out there in Texas. And Jones Beefmasters, last but certainly not least, sell every June. They sell throughout the year. Mr. Clark, thank you for what you do for the breed every day, and thank you for what you do for our show. Welcome to Beefmaster Banner. We're your hosts, Josh Morrison and Jared Strickland. How's it going, Jared?
That's going good. The sun's shining. We've been in the hayfield the last couple of days, so we've been waiting, getting all this rain, and finally got a good hay crop. We finally got dry weather to get in there and get some of it anyway.
Heck yeah, we've got 2 fields cut, and we've got some more we've got to cut. It's just been a normal North Carolina spring where you're just kind of dodging rain showers and hoping that 10% chance of rain don't turn into 100.
That's right. Because it's that time of year. It can happen any minute, especially how it is in Southeast.
Absolutely. You just never know when those I know the other day it said 0% chance of rain, sun all day, and we got the worst storm of the spring so far that evening. So I don't know how that works, but I'm not paid to know how that works either. So
yeah, that's right.
Well, tonight we've been kind of discussing this, and was gonna get into it, and we're gonna start a series of episodes on EPDs. Dr. Lance Bauer has been gracious enough to agree to come on throughout the next couple months. We won't try to do it every single episode. Sometimes they may be back to back, but we're gonna work through these, and I think it's going to give people a lot better idea of how to select for them, how to use them, and how to make them work in your herd. Dr. Lance, how you doing?
Oh, I'm good. Just like Jared said, it finally got a little bit of sunshine, but like you said, we had 0% chance of rain during the day yesterday, and I got home and I had rocking chairs blown off the back porch and rain in the rain gauge. So
you just
hard
never know.
To beat a job of a weatherman, ain't it? Get paid to be wrong every time.
That's pretty much it. But we do appreciate you, Dr. Bauer, coming on and talking to us about EPDs. I know, as I said a minute ago, you've kind of been talking to us about this, and you guys wanted to get more involved this year, and it helped us because it gives us a lot more subjects to reach out and talk to. And I think, as we've talked, these EPDs are very important, but I think we need to learn how to use them in the proper way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. They're a tool, and we have to use the tool properly.
And tonight we're gonna focus more on the indexes, the $T, $M, and then the feed efficiency. We're gonna kind of hit the high points of them tonight, and move on to some more later on. And maybe what we'll do, especially if we get a lot of you asking more questions, this is your time to ask questions on Facebook and everything, so we can bring them back to Lance and say, hey, this is what we've got. Now let's, we can do an episode on it. I think this is going to be very beneficial.
And it seems like in the past, a lot of the requests that we've had for episodes, the EPDs get brought up quite a bit. So I think we're finally going to knock this out and get them all covered.
We're gonna get some
Perfect.
anyways.
Yeah, some of them, yeah.
We get some of it. Yeah.
That's it. That's it. So I guess before we even get started, I know that when you were on in the past, Lance, that we've mentioned reading EPDs and things like that. But I guess let's just start at the very beginning. How do we need to interpret EPDs, specifically dollar T, dollar M, and feed efficiency?
So I think really what we're doing is starting in the right place with this. It may seem a little backwards to some people starting with these indexes, but to me, these indexes is where you should start because they prevent some things like single trait selection. And I'll get more into how the indexes, what they do in a little bit. But EPDs, it's all about differences. Um, so, if we're looking at dollar M, you're looking at we're looking at pounds of calf wean per cow exposed is what we're looking at there. And so if we're looking at dollar M and you're looking at a 28 versus an 18, you're expecting $10 more. You're expecting a return of $10 more per calf from that bull on the maternal side. If you're looking at dollar T, it's going to be the same thing. If you're looking at a 120 versus a 80, you're looking at 40 pounds more per calf that's on the rail on average from the bull with the 120 versus the 80. So that's indexes are looking at economically relevant traits and using those economically relevant traits and weighting them so that you're not single trait selecting. Dollar FE, that's feed efficiency. So it's balancing feed efficiency with growth from weaning to yearling.
So it's kind of the same so that FE made is the dollars would come from feed if it's saved, right? Am I thinking about that right? Yeah.
It's coming from the feed efficiency and the growth combined. So and the feed efficiency is the RFI or residual feed intake, which we can get into that more when we talk about that EPD. And I mean, you could almost dedicate an entire episode just to feed efficiency and measures of feed efficiency. But that's where that comes from and where your money's coming from there, or your dollars are coming from there.
So the dollar T and dollar M, is it a conglomeration of all of the EPDs kind of combined, and then that's where your dollar T and dollar M come from? Or am I thinking of
Yes.
that backwards?
No, you're thinking that correctly. So, all those indexes are made up of the different EPDs with different weightings on them. And just to kind of take a little history lesson with indexes, if we go back into, Hazel and Lush and some of the founders of animal breeding, I mean, index selection has been around forever. Uh, and it's really the key concept to animal breeding is selecting on an index or selecting for traits that make you money rather than selecting for a single trait. So like in dollar M, right now, dollar M is comprised of birth weight, weaning weight. You want a little bit lower yearling weight so that your mature cow weight is lower. So you're getting more pounds weaned per pounds of cow, so a more efficient cow. And then milk and scrotal circumference. Now, dollar M, we're going to look at here in the next year or so and get it updated to include our new EPDs of age at first calf, stayability, and those type EPDs will go into the new dollar M. Dollar T is composed, it's a terminal index, so it's composed of weaning weight, yearling weight, ribeye area, fat, and marbling. So we're looking at carcass and growth for dollar T. And then FE is composed of RFI and weaning weight and yearling weight.
Okay, so I guess if you're listening to this, that kind of gives you an idea of what comprises each index. It's almost kind of like the way I think about it. When people was doing retirement investing, a lot of times it's an index. That way you kind of get a broad spectrum of different things instead of one single stock. It's almost like like that index of the you're getting all those combined together. So get a better idea of what you got going on there. So
And these indexes are designed to be very robust. So I mean, we're trying to account for as much as possible, and they're not exact. I mean, if it says on average 10 pounds, I mean $10 more for this bull than this bull, you can expect around on average $10 more. But they're built to be very robust for where you can expect that in many situations. In most situations, if you're selecting on them and utilizing them properly as the tool that they're designed for. I mean, you can't select on the maternal tool and for great returns on the terminal tool and vice versa. I mean, it's like taking a screwdriver and a saw. You can't put a screw in very well with a saw, and you can't cut a piece of wood very well with a
yeah,
screwdriver.
that makes a lot of sense.
And
So-
I think it's.
So go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say 2 points that I kind of got out of that. One, this is kind of bringing out the importance of not single trait selecting, because if you do, you like you said, Lance, you want that balance. You don't want too much of one and not enough of the other, because you still need both of them at the end of the day. The second thing that I got out of that is, and I might get in trouble, hopefully not saying this, but the importance of putting in bad information and good information, whether it's a negative calf that's a cull and not worth anything, going to the sale barn. It's very important to put all that in there, because that directly affects all the rest of them.
That's absolutely correct. And this is why, like I said, I like starting with these indexes rather than the individual EPDs because it takes you away from that single trait selection. And I can tell you just from, I guess, human nature, as we sit there and we look at these EPDs, human nature is to go for the bigger numbers. So, I mean, we're sitting there and we didn't have these indexes. We're going to look at, weaning weight and yearling weight and say, holy cow, look at these. These are huge. I'm going to use these. These try to optimize that for, like I said, for either a terminal program or a maternal program, or if you're looking at feed efficiency. They try to optimize those numbers as much as possible. And one of the biggest downfalls to single trait selection is when you select on one single trait, you will adversely affect another trait, whether you're trying to or not. You'll have an adverse effect on something else. And the biggest one there is birth weight, and people select lower on birth weight, and eventually that's going to affect your weaning weights and your yearling weights. And so single trait selection is avoided when you start utilizing these indexes and these tools that are put together like that. And then to go to your point on putting data in, it is crucial to put all your data in. And I think we can dive into this some more at a later point and talk about, the development of EPDs and what exactly goes into it. But if you don't put all your data in, say you only put in your weaning weights on those animals that you are going to sell or you're going to register and retain and use, and you set your culling criteria at 500 pounds weaning weight, and your weights go from 500 to 650 pounds, and you had 3 calves that you took to the sale barn that were raised in the same contemporary group that ranged from 400 to 450 pounds. Well, I mean, you discredited those animals that did really well and performed really well. You kind of discredited their genetics
Because they didn't have that comparison to help.
because of that comparison was gone. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess when you're kind of going back to the dollar, you just talking about the weaning weight, yearling weight. So when you're selecting for a higher dollar T, you could be selecting for higher weaning weights and yearling weights
Yes, you'll be,
overall. Yeah.
yeah, with dollar T, you'll be selecting for higher weaning and higher yearling weights.
Mhm.
You know, in these points you're making, there's 4 or 5 talking points already in there that I just think this series is going to be great, because you've already said things that Jared and I feel certain are going to take away from this and go, we need to talk, we need to dedicate an entire episode to this, and this. Just because there's so many different ways we can break things down.
And I think we need to evaluate things from a performance standpoint on the EPDs and what goes into them and how they're calculated. I mean, that could be a whole show within itself, on just, what goes into an EPD and how it's calculated and why do we have genomic EPDs. I mean, that we could go on for days. I've had several long conversations, and I have them all the time, about why did, this animal's EPDs move? Why is this animal not where I thought it should be EPD wise? And lots of things that we can talk about there. But just, like I said, just starting these indexes, they're an easy place to start as well. Versus trying to analyze every EPD and look at every number on the page when you're making a selection.
You kind of mentioned something there that kind of made me think of something. So, and inside that index, does each, say, like for dollar T, so you got weaning weight, yearling weight, and you said carcass traits as well. Are they weighted a certain percent, or are they all weighted the same as far
No,
as to?
they're all weighted a little bit differently. So, we weight IMF a decent amount to select for quality grade. We want to select for yield grade, so we weight that a little bit differently. All of it's weighted just a little bit differently. They're not all on the same weight. One of the most unique exercises I ever did with indexes is I sat down with a bunch of guys, and this was before my time with BBU when I was in grad school, and we just kind of made our own indexes. We had a list of, 150, 200 bulls and all their EPDs, and just very rudimentary. We're going to do a terminal index for carcass. And we all came up with our own weights based on what we thought would make a good carcass. Typed in those weights, and then, and everybody's index came up with about the same top 10 bulls. Did the same thing for, a maternal index. And the same thing, we may have ranked the top 10 bulls differently, but those indexes were so robust, and the things that were selected for and weighted for were close enough that we were coming up with the same animals in the top 10. So it was a pretty neat little exercise.
Yeah, that's interesting right there. Because I mean, it does make a lot of sense because IMF is important on the quality grade, so it should be. And obviously, you get more premium for that too if there is in the market. So it would affect more dollars on that terminal side. So that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And that's what we try to select for, with that is how do we make the most money on the rail? And so, Beefmaster may bring a little bit more in terms of yield grade, so we may weight that yield grade calculation a little bit more. Um, and, and these indexes are something that can be revisited. Um, and I'd like to, revisit dollar T as well, because I think that, we were working on a 5 or 10 year average when dollar T came out. And I don't think that 10-year average has changed that much, but we may need to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on the accuracy of the index, because it's its own separate deal, kind of. So it's not like the
Yeah,
EPD with accuracy.
you can't really assign an accuracy to the index because it's, it may be weighted this much towards yearling weight and weaning weight, and this bull's got a 95% accuracy for those two. and only has like a 80% accuracy on carcass traits or 70% accuracy. So you can't really assign an accuracy to the to the indexes. I mean, we could, but
It seemed like that'd be very complex.
yeah, and EPDs are complex enough on their
Yeah.
own in terms of calculation that let's not complicate things more.
Agreed. So kind of going into something else I want to ask is as far as records and creating EPDs, how many records do we have to have in order to create an EPD?
Okay, so I mean, you'll hear various numbers. The most common number is about 2,000 records. Once you hit that 2,000 mark on records, usable records, so animals that aren't single contemporaries and that kind of stuff. Once you hit that 2,000 usable records mark, you can start to calculate an EPD with some fairly good confidence. I mean, I've got a little simple program that just kind of shows the effect of, differences within contemporary groups on what an EPD does, how it can move. And it's got, I think, 6 animals in it. So you can calculate it with 6 animals. You can calculate it with probably 2 or 3 animals. But to get an accurate EPD that's not going to just jump around and change a whole lot, about 2,000 records.
So it takes quite a bit of data to get that going then.
Yes, it takes quite a bit of data to get a new EPD established.
Mm-hmm.
When we're selecting for cattle to try to better our $T, $M, is there anything we should be looking at other than the EPD? I mean, I guess the birth weight, wean weight, yearling weight, I guess you don't really want the extremes. You just want a good, I'd say middle ground. Because I think a lot of times with birth weight, and this is something we'll get into when we talk about those EPDs, but I almost think we put too much emphasis on birth weight and not enough sometimes on cavities. So I feel like I might have just answered the question that I was asking you, but as far as how we need to select, how would you say we need to do that?
So I think the biggest thing to realize, and I mean we can dig into this more, is you've got to select on an optimum. Maximums, minimums are very rarely the optimum. They look great, they're fun, but they are very rarely the optimum for what you're doing. So I mean, my goal, if you're looking at it in terms of percentile rank and say you want all your cattle in the top 35% for $T or $M, whatever your goal is, that's what I would look for. That's kind of where I would say, okay, that's an optimum. Now let's find a bull that helps me to select towards that goal. And as much as I love numbers, the important thing to realize with all of this and the selection and utilizing EPDs is that animal still has to be a functional, sound animal that's eye appealing as well. I've been for personal stuff when I've bought bulls, I've gone through and said, these are my top bulls in terms of numbers. And then I've gone out and looked at those bulls and they had feed issues or they had structure issues or something was wrong and my top bulls for the numbers I was looking for, I might have had to move my numbers just a little bit, still within my range to find a bull that fit my criteria and was still functional. So I mean I think, and I can't stress this enough, EPDs, like I said, are a tool. So you got to have sound functional cattle that perform, and be able to use those EPDs as an extra tool in your selection criteria.
Yeah, I think that's really a great point, Lance, to remind folks of is they have to actually do the job to even have the EPDs go in your favor. It's a good thing if they're not functional. Just because they got good EPDs, they can't express that if they can't do their job. So that's something I always remember. Kind of looking at feed efficiency, can you give us a little bit more detail on what goes into that EPD? Because that's a question I get some, and I honestly I don't understand it myself. So can you kind of give us the broad
Yeah.
overview of that one?
Yeah, so the big view of that is, so the first thing that goes in there is RFI, and that's residual feed intake. And basically that animal, to get a residual feed intake, an actual measure, that animal has to go through a grow safe or Vitelli system or a smart feed system that takes and calculates, individual intake every time that animal eats. And then from there, we calculate, okay, we expected this animal to gain this much based on how much they ate. How far off from what we expected is it? Did they eat more to gain that amount? And that's a positive RFI and less feed efficient. Or did they eat less? And that's a negative RFI and more feed efficient. And so as you look at those RFIs, negative, you think, okay, that's more feed efficient. That's going to be great. Well, sometimes an animal can get a negative RFI because they don't eat and they don't gain very well either. So you can see some animals that have a negative RFI that don't grow as well. Um, so that's why this $FE came about, is to look at the feed efficiency as well as growth from weaning to yearling when those animals are being tested. So we're combining that efficiency, that RFI, with post-weaning growth.
But I didn't even really think about that. I've noticed I've had cattle in the past that have not. You almost say that you can tell they don't have as good of an appetite and they don't gain as well either. So that's interesting that you mentioned that the negative RFI could be just from not eating as much.
Yeah. So that's why we did this as an index, is so that we don't just select for animals that don't eat as much, because we know that if an animal doesn't eat, it's not going to go out and do its job.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we want good moderate cows, but at the end of the day, when we sell cattle, our end product is pounds of beef.
That's right. So I guess from the commercial market, tying all these together, starting with feed efficiency, can you describe how commercial folks could use this buying?
So as a commercial producer looking at feed efficiency, to them, that's going to, especially those that retain ownership, that's going to save them money through the yard. I mean, if you're retaining ownership and you got an animal that's more efficient and grows well, that's going to save you some money in the long run right there. And Dollar T, utilize that and say, okay, I'm going to retain ownership, and then, I'm going to be able to garner some more premiums on the rail after that. Dollar M, I think, I think it's probably our most important EPD or index that we have right now, just because of our strength as a maternal breed. And that's what people need to be looking at. And, I can give it to y'all. I have an old article that I wrote when we first came out with Dollar T and Dollar M, showing basically the compounding value of Dollar M and keeping heifers out of good Dollar M animals. I could share that with y'all if y'all wanted to share that, like on your Facebook page or something. I'd have to go back and find it, but
yeah, that'd be good.
Dollar M really compounds itself year after year by keeping daughters out of these bulls and these good Dollar M cows. And the biggest question I get, and this is a little bit off the topic of EPDs, but one of the things I get is, where can I find some commercial Beefmaster females, some half-blood females? That's what people want to find. Well, they're really, really hard to source, because most people that are making them to keep because they know how good of a female they are.
Yeah.
People aren't selling them.
Yeah. You don't sell them if you got good cows.
And going back to feed efficiency, it makes a lot more sense now that you explained it, that you won't, I guess the best way, like you explained it, is, a cow that doesn't eat as much, which is the RFI, but that gains better in doing so is the way that I've come out with that. It sounded like you explained it.
So RFI, negative RF, sorry, the dollar FE. Yeah, so basically we're trying to select for a cow that or animal that doesn't eat as much, but gains really well. Yeah, that's what we're selecting for with dollar FE.
Yeah, perfect. Well, this has been a really good episode. I really hate to quit. I'll pick 3 more out and keep going. Now we'll table that for another time. But I think this is really a good, like you said, a good start, a good starting point. I know before the episode we discussed it, and I was in my head, I was thinking, wonder why this is such a good place to start. But now that we're through it, it makes all the sense in the world to me as to why we would start here, and kind of get rolling on our series this way. So, Lance, again, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like it gives a good airplane view of everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this gives a good airplane view, and it kind of shows you where to start to not so you don't start on the wrong foot, single trait selecting for something.
That's right. That's right. Don't definitely want to go down that rabbit hole. It's hard to come back from that. But
No,
we
absolutely.
sure
not.
appreciate you having time coming on here, Lance, and starting this deal. I know I'm kind of excited about it. I'm sure everyone else will too. That's interested in it. That's been asking for EPD episodes, and we'll slowly work our way through them in the future.
Perfect.
I think it'll be very beneficial for sure. But we'll keep rolling on this, and we'll gather a few more EPDs, and we'll keep this series rolling, and we'll see everybody on the next episode.
Appreciate it, Lance.
Perfect. Thank you all.
Well, we want to thank everybody for listening to the Beefmaster Banner podcast. Please know that we are on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and we are on YouTube. Just search Beefmaster Banner. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. We love hearing from you, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.